In this example, I've inserted an image onto a canvas, and then I'm going to start a new sketch, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. And initially, I'll just put it out here in space, and I'll draw a line then from the midpoint of this line to the midpoint of that line. Now I'm going to change all of this to construction geometry. And then I'm going to, maybe I know how far I want this to be from here over to here. And so I'm going to dimension this rectangle, and maybe, see, I see that this is only 10 millimeters, and maybe I want that label to be much larger. And let's say that I want it to be 135. And I'll give it a proportional height, let's say 200. And so maybe that's the size that I want this label to be. So I'm going to temporarily turn off the canvas, and I'm going to put a midpoint constraint between this line and the origin. And so I've moved this rectangle so that I have now a line of symmetry about the origin and the basic outline of the size of my label. I'm going to turn on the visibility of the origin. I don't need to see these other pieces of origin geometry. I just need to make sure that I can always see the origin. So I turn the visibility of that on. And then let's turn the canvas back on. And I need to edit that canvas. So let's finish this sketch. And I'm going to drag this sketch so that it occurs in history before the canvas. So I have a time machine here. Now I can put that back here before the canvas, and I'll edit the canvas, and I'm going to drag this corner to scale this. Now you can also type in a scale factor. I'm just going to scale it by eye, and so I want it to be approximately the size of the rectangle that I put in on sketch number 1. And then so here's my origin right there, and I want to move this image so that it's symmetrical. It's hard to see this, but my sketch line, I'm trying to see if I can get that to show up better. Well, anyways, my sketch there, that sketch line is right here, and so I want the center of this image to be over, and we can see the origin. So I'm going to drag this over. And let's put it. I'm looking at also at this ellipse, and so I'm putting that the origin right about in the middle, right there. But on my rectangle, there's more distance between here and here than there is between up here, and so let's just move that up a little bit. Again, I want to zoom back in here, so let's put the origin right there and move it over just a little bit. Okay, so I'm pretty satisfied with that as a location for my image. So I'll say OK to that. So I've centered my image, and inside my rectangular box that I put in sketch number 1. So there's sketch number 1. And then I'll start adding additional geometry. And so I might want to put in these ellipses. And so I'll start a new sketch. Now, I always leave sketch number 1 alone. I don't put anything else other than my sizing geometry on sketch number 1. And so then let's start a new sketch. And I'm going to let's turn off the canvas for a minute. I want to project this line into my new sketch. So I'll do P for project, and I'll select that line. So I always will have this line of symmetry in each new sketch that I do. So I have 2 references. I have this center line of actually I have 3. The center line of symmetry, the origin, and then the overall size of my label. And I like to change this to construction then, so I'll select that line and right click, change that to a construction line type. let's turn that canvas back on. And so let's create an ellipse, and I'm going to put that ellipse someplace on this line. Now ideally it would be here at the origin, but I don't think that, you know, the center of my rectangle isn't the center of where this ellipse is. But I'm going to click about right there. I'm going to come down and I'll click about right here, and I'll come over here, I'll click about right there. Now it's going to be hard to see. Let me turn off that canvas. So there is my ellipse. I could then put dimensions in for that ellipse to fully constrain it, you know, whatever the width I want, and whatever the height that I want, and it's almost circular. And then the distance from here to here, let's make that 5. Okay, so that ellipse is fully constrained. And let's turn the canvas back on. So I've drawn this ellipse right here. And then I might continue to do this one and this one as well on the same sketch. I might put the arc in here, the arc in here, here, and here. But I'm going to go on to the next sketch just to show, you know, those arcs and those ellipses might be, you know, something I put into this sketch. There's also a rectangle here, so that I try not to put too much into one sketch. So I'm going to finish that sketch, and I'll start another sketch. I'll create sketch, and again I will project geometry, that line from the first sketch, my line of symmetry. And so if I turn off this canvas, so I'm toggling that canvas on and off all the time. I like to change that line to construction, the one that I just projected into my current sketch. And then I think actually what I did is I projected the line from the you know, I don't like to do that. I projected accidentally the line from the ellipse, so I'm going to undo back to where I did that. Okay, so let's turn off the second sketch, and I'm going to turn off the canvas for a minute. And so I like to be careful about what parent-child relationships that I create. The only, you know, I want this rectangle and the center line to be a parent for all the reference for all of the other sketches. And so to be careful that I always project that line. And so now if I turn on sketch number 2 again, so there's a line that goes from here to here that I projected before. I don't really want that line as my reference line, because that would create a dependency that is now two. Think of that like a child, parent, then grandparent. So I'm two dependencies down, and I want to have one parent. And so let's see, I've got that, and let's turn the canvas back on. I'm going to turn off those two sketches so that they don't interfere with what I'm doing. And I'll zoom in here, and I'll zoom in as much as I need to. And sometimes, you know, if you have a your screen is normally longer than it is taller, and so if you just turn it sideways, you can see in here better. Now I'm just going to do these as rectangles. I'm going to leave off the ellipse, the fillets for now, but you can put in the fillets. So I'm going to draw rectangles from here to here, and then I'll draw another rectangle from here to here, and I'll draw a rectangle from here to here. A lot of times I add the fillets as a feature anyway. I don't put it in the sketch. I add it later on as a feature. And so dimension, here's my origin from here to here. That distance, let's make that 19.5. I like to use nice simple numbers. I'll round that off to 19.5. I might do that 19.25. So I brought it up just a little bit. I'll dimension this distance from here to here. Let's do that as 1.1. And I'll go a little bit bigger. Let's do 1.25. Okay, and if I want to make that a little bigger than that, I could go a little bit longer. Let's dimension this distance and I'm going to do that as 4, and then I'm going to dimension the distance from here to here. Let's do that as 30, and I'll dimension the distance from here to the origin horizontally. So I had the vertical dimension, I'll need to put in a horizontal dimension. Do that as 12.5. And let's turn off the canvas for a minute so you can see what I'm doing here. So I have this much of it fully defined. I want to make this line right here collinear to this line, and I think I'd also like to make that equal. I think I want to make that equal to this one up here. So let's we'll do equal, and I'll select this line. Now there's 2 lines here. I want to make sure I get the right one. So that time I would have got it, but I'll just do a long hold of the mouse button down, and then I can toggle through the lines that I want. So I want those 2 to be equal, and so now that becomes fully constrained. And I want this line to be equal to this line. Again, I'll hold that mouse button down until I get the select other tool comes up, and I'll make those equal. And so now that is fully constrained. Now if I finish sketch, my dimensions are hidden. You see, by keeping these sketches simple, and I might add some more to this one, but I still keep it relatively simple. I don't want to get too complex. And then keep toggling the image on and off so that I can make sure that I'm following my design intent. And think of this, each one of these little pieces, think of this as an egg. So that's an egg, this is an egg, you know, this is an egg, and you're juggling those eggs. Fusion has to keep track of the constraints simultaneously through all of that geometry. But if you say finish sketch, then that geometry is solved, and it only has to worry about whatever the active sketch is. So by only putting, you know, a few pieces of geometry in each sketch, and I would look at each one of these closed profiles. So this is a closed profile. I might even, you know, I don't guess this isn't completely symmetric, but I might even, you know, do a line across here and do this minus this portion right here. Do all the rest of this is symmetrical. I'm not sure if, you know, so do one portion of it, and then later when you do your features, mirror your features. So think of things like that to keep the solver with an easier task to accomplish.